So migration basics. What is it? Why do birds do it? It's crazy. It's just this great thing that everybody knows about, and we still don't quite understand, not all of the way. So why do birds migrate? Food, nesting, genetics, other factors. Food resources are also dependent on the seasons and can change in abundance. So this means that birds need to move south to more abundant food sources. So right now in the winter in the northern states, I think there are some states already where it's snowing. We don't know what that means down here, but we get all of the good birds when it starts snowing. So why do birds move back north if food is abundant in year-round, southern habitats like Florida? And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So these migrating species require specific habitat, and they may not find it here in Florida or at other wintering grounds. So for example, red knots, like in the picture here, nest on the open Arctic tundra, not on sunny, sandy beaches. So once they have filled up on fuel down here, they're ready to head back north. So it's partially about genetics, that's self-explanatory, but there are other factors as well. Weather, day length can affect the need to migrate. But all migration is not the same. So there are different types of migrants. We have permanent residents. So these are the birds that can find adequate food year round during the summer months, during the winter months. And we see quite a few species here in Florida that are permanent residents. There are short distance migrants, and they can change locations just on a small scale, based on season. We have medium distance migrants that can move distances ranging from 1 to several states, and those long distance migrants that move between the breeding ranges, throughout, over countries, such as the well-known red knot, for instance. So there are about 350 species of North American birds that are grouped in this long distance migrant category. And that to me is just, migration and movement is just one of those research topics that is so interesting. And, there are so many projects that are still trying to find the answers to these types of questions. So like I said, how do they know where to go? And that's what these researchers are trying to figure out. We do not have all of the answers. So genetics, birds are adapted to migrate, so it's instinct to know where to go. Some birds use the sun and stars as a light source to direct them where to go. The Earth's magnetic field can also affect a bird's sense of direction and assist with migration. Following specific routes year after year to get an abundant food source. And there is some evidence that I've heard for a sense of smell, but I don't really have many details on this, but I wanted to list it because again, we don't have all of the answers. How do we know where these birds go? Researchers are helping us answer that question right now through multiple projects, research. We know we see certain birds at certain times of the year, but more information is needed. We can gather this information through colored bands and flag combinations. And these bands and flags have specific codes on them to help individually ID a bird. And that's how we can really keep track. People can recite and report these bands and these individuals, and it helps researchers know where birds have been stopping, how long they've been there. And that need to gather the recite data in order to answer these questions, where do you go? Where do these birds go? There are also geolocators that are used that gather data constantly using satellites and GPS locations, pinging off of these satellites. Birds do need to be recaptured to download all of that data off of this teeny tiny geolocator. But you can get so much data from these little geolocators on the birds' movements. There are also nano tags. So with nano tags, these birds must fly near a tower that picks up the signal. So I think many of you have heard of notice towers. And the birds are usually fitted with bands as well, but you can gather a lot more information with the nano tag if the bands are not recited. So it depends on the level of funding and what makes sense for a specific species of bird on how to keep track. So I'm sure many of you are aware of the different flyways of the Americas. And these are the different flyways. There are 4 different flyways. And we are part of the Atlantic Flyway, which runs along the east coast of the United States. But we are just going to focus on Florida because that's what I know. We all know that the nesting season is incredibly important for shorebirds, but not all shorebirds that we see are Florida natives. Florida doesn't get just the human kind of snowbird. This state is such an important stopover site and wintering site for many snowbird species of the shorebirds and seabird variety. I want to focus on Florida and Pinellas County, where we are in particular, because I want to stress how important our beaches are even during the non-breeding season. Okay, so let's talk about our Florida migrants. And these are just snapshots of the different species that we see out on the beach. So there are many species of these migrants that pass through or winter in Florida. And many of them are very common, like the semi-palmated plover, the ruddy turnstone. We do get ring-billed gulls and sanderlings, piping plovers, of course, black skimmers from out of state, red knots. We get quite a few that come to Florida, either to, like I said, pass through, or they will actually stop in Florida and winter. Okay, so migration is amazing. And as we already know, it can change from species to species depending on what they've adapted to, primarily based on resource abundance such as food. Black skimmers are really a great example of how we also can't assume that each species follows the same migration pattern. So there are multiple banding projects for black skimmers throughout the United States. One of them happens to be right here in Pinellas County, led by Dr. Beth Voorhees of Eckerd College. And based on these banding projects, we've learned that black skimmers follow these types of migration patterns as far as we know. We have some permanent residents. We have some that are short distance migrants. We have some that are medium distance migrants. And we aren't quite sure what drives these black skimmers individually. Let's see. So we have a black skimmer who we could probably consider a permanent resident in Pinellas County. So this is local A44. If you are a bird steward during the breeding seasons, A44 regularly breeds at the Indian Shores Skimmer Colony. So A44, oh, I could tell you lots of stories about A44, but I don't want to get off track. Let's talk about migration. A44 is a male, and we'll talk about the importance of banding later too. So he was banded at the Indian Shores Colony in 2015, and he breeds at the Indian Shores Colony every year. But he hangs out along the Courtney Campbell Causeway every winter. So because of this, he has his band. We have recited him at Courtney Campbell Causeway, the West End where the Dog Beach is, Ben T. Davis Beach, or even at Gandy Beach off of the Gandy Causeway. So he sticks around in Pinellas County. He has since he was banded. He likes it here. Let's talk about our. Okay, here we go. Okay, so A16. This is another black skimmer. It was actually A44's mate for a few years. We would consider her a short distance migrant. So she was banded at the St. Pete Beach Colony in 2015. We haven't seen her in a little over a year, but from what we know, she heads down to Marco Island every winter. What's really interesting, like I said, is A16 and A44 have been a nesting pair in 2017 and 2018, but they winter at different sites. They would meet back up again at Indian Shores and then go to separate wintering sites. So that's really interesting. We were assuming that, the skimmers were sticking around in Pinellas County. Why would they go anywhere else? And that's a great question. Why was A16 going down to Marco, but A44 was just sticking around here? So we also have black skimmers from out of state that come to Florida. So we think, oh, well, black skimmers are here year round. We see them on the beaches during the summer breeding. We see them, at beaches during the winter, and they're just hanging out. But it turns out they're not all just Florida birds. So for example, this bird right here is a New York black skimmer. I don't have the specifics right now on this particular bird, but we see New York or New Jersey birds with yellow bands on their legs wintering at a few spots in Pinellas County. So this picture was actually taken a couple of years ago at the Dunedin Causeway, and it was hanging out in a flock of skimmers with one from Pinellas County. That was banded at Sand Key Park, or just south of Sand Key Park. So we have these flocks of skimmers that contain birds from all over. We are now starting to see black skimmers being banded in North Carolina that are coming down this way as well. So, we have a good mix of locals and out-of-state birds. Now, again, going back to A16, for instance, we're not really sure why a local bird would decide to stick around or why one would decide to head, quote unquote, south for the winter. And that's really interesting data that, we're still gathering or reporting back to the researcher. And like I said, we do have out-of-state birds that come to Florida and winter here for the entire winter. So red knots, I think, are our most famous long-distance migrants. Like I mentioned before, they nest in the Arctic tundra, where the green pin is at the very top. They usually follow the path along the orange pins. They'll head, straight down with a few stopovers, to the Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. On their way back up north to their breeding grounds in the spring, they will stop at a well-known site in Delaware when horseshoe crabs are spawning. But Pinellas County, where the blue pin is, actually hosts a wintering population of red knots. So there's a large migratory flock that stops over for about a month to forage and build up more energy for their long flight further south. And a fraction of them actually remain all winter spread out throughout the county. So it's very interesting that these birds will stick around in Pinellas County or, you know, this part of Florida all winter. Why aren't they heading south? Well, you know, we think that it's because we have an abundance of food that they're able to get without them having to spend all of that energy to get all the way down to the southern tip of, you know, South America. So why spend all of that energy to get down there when they can find that same food resource here in Florida? There's actually a biologist with U.S. Fish and Wildlife who wants to answer that question, and we can hopefully work with him to get some of our local Pinellas County red knots banded to answer that question. So this is red knot. We'll call it 3CL, and it has been recited multiple times. The majority of those resightings in Pinellas County, and you can sort of follow the migration route of this particular bird based on its resightings along the East Coast. And I believe we have seen this bird again this year. So if you look really closely, it was captured in 2010 and banded. So we know this bird is at least 10 years old. And of course, wisdom, we have to throw wisdom in here if we're talking about migration. She is a long distance migrant. She was first banded in 1956 on Midway Atoll, and she's at least 70 years old because she was banded as an adult. But she has flown over 3 million miles in her lifetime, and that's like flying to the moon and back over 6 times, probably over 7 times by now. And we know this because of the bans. We know that there has been a huge decline in their population, but we also know that she comes back every year. So this is incredibly important data that, you know, biologists are able to gather on these birds during their migration. Okay, so great. We know that shorebirds stick around. We know that birds of all kinds travel great distances. We also know Florida is a very important stopover site and wintering ground for all of these species that I've shown in photos or talked about, you know, aside from wisdom. But what does this mean for us? Why do we care about what these birds are doing in the winter? They don't have babies right now. They, you know, they don't have to take care of anything, just themselves. And they look like they're just kind of sitting on the beach anyway. So, you know, why do we care? Well, we know that we have local birds and we know that we have out-of-state birds. So we care because all of these birds have a goal, no matter where they are, and that is to eat, and that is to sleep and reproduce. They're foraging to replenish that energy used during migration, and they are resting to store up that energy for the flight back home to breed. So without our help, these birds will not survive their migration, short or long distance. And if they cannot survive, they are not going to contribute during the breeding season. So if we don't have those contributions during breeding season, we don't have those cute little baby fluffball shorebirds during the summers. And of course, that it's a big cycle. So the big question is, how can I help? There are so many opportunities to help shorebirds locally during nesting season. But how are we supposed to help them during the non-breeding seasons and during their migrations? So this is something that if you have attended any of my talks about nesting shorebirds, breeding shorebirds, I will always say, give birds space. That is my #1 rule on how anybody can help, whether they're big bird nerds or whether they're just visiting the beach for a few hours. So, whether in the breeding season or the non-breeding season or in the midst of migration, shorebirds and seabirds need space on beaches. So we can help provide that space they need to breed, feed, and rest by walking around flocks or even just walking around a single individual. Disturbance that causes a shorebird to take flight unnecessarily uses energy that's needed when recovering from or preparing for migration. And we frequently see these big mixed flocks, like in the picture, of these birds just resting. They need that rest. So again, on the same topic of give birds space, if you aren't sure whether you are too close to a shorebird, watch their behavior. Do they remain resting or preening? Were they foraging and then they suddenly stopped when you approached? Is the bird vocalizing at all? Did it fly away? These behaviors are key indicators to whether a bird is stressed out by your presence. So again, we focus on giving birds space during the breeding season because they have chicks and they're trying to take care of those chicks. But what about when they're just hanging out? Like I mentioned in the last slide, they are conserving their energy. We must keep this in mind, especially when a rarity shows up. We've seen shorebirds get blown in from storms and cold fronts during migration frequently. I think in the last, maybe a couple years ago, that Hudsonian godwit, I think it was, got blown in. And we do see the brown booby come as well during the winters. So we do get some of those rarities and those oddballs that show up. But, can you imagine? It's not supposed to be here. It got really blown off course. How tough was that to just get so blown off course like that, just miles and miles from where you're supposed to be. So those birds especially need that space to rest now that they've flown so far off course. And again, it's important to keep behaviors in mind. Keeping pets off the beach. Pets on the beach, and that are too close to shorebirds can cause a disturbance to that resting and feeding behavior. So keeping them off the beach, in Pinellas County, that's just a countywide rule. But if you're elsewhere, keeping pets on a leash, if they are allowed, is essential for the shorebirds to rest instead of wasting that precious energy for their next big flight. And of course, attend a bird walk. Local Audubon chapters, such as Clearwater Audubon, have great bird walks for both, on and off the beach. I am a big shorebird nerd, so that's what I prefer, but any walk is so important to learn more about migration. So participating in these bird walks allows you to ask questions, learn new ideas, and meet others that have similar interests in bird conservation. And you can also find out about opportunities to volunteer. So here's a shameless plug. We, with Audubon Florida, have lots of opportunities to volunteer during the breeding season. So let me know if you're interested. But other than that, the next thing you can do to help is to report those banded birds that I've been talking about. So we have all of this information about migration. We know all of this data because of banded shorebirds, because of tagged shorebirds. And this is something that's so important to continue collecting data for. Many shorebird and seabird species are banded for these research purposes. It's just not for no reason at all. American oyster catchers, skimmers, snowy plovers, Caspian terns, gull-billed terns, even laughing gulls. Yes, I have seen one banded laughing gull. But there so many more are banded to answer certain important questions. And of course, it's particularly important for threatened species, because collecting this data on these banded threatened birds can help us determine population estimates. Is the population declining? Are they doing better? Are these management practices helping or making any difference whatsoever? How are these birds using habitat? How are they using the food resources? How old are they? We've seen a banded royal tern. Once it was reported, the information came back that royal tern was 30 years old and looked great. You know, it's so incredible. And then of course, collecting data on migration and movements. And that's just to name a few research topics that biologists are contributing to. So reporting banded birds that you see on the beach, off the beach, it really contributes data to help answer a lot of these important questions. So this is something that, you know, you can even do a Google search, just, you know, bird band resites, and all of these resources will come up for you if you just aren't sure. These are just a few of the websites, excuse me. Sometimes banders like to be emailed directly, but these websites can help direct you where to go to report. Most banders love to share the history of the banded birds as well, which is really cool. It's something I'm really interested in finding out about. If you are on Facebook and want to learn more about banded birds and connect with others, there is a Facebook group, the Florida Banded Birds Resightings. This isn't necessarily a place, you know, a substitute for reporting your banded birds, but it's great to try and, if you have trouble figuring out where to report a band, you can ask others in there, you know, that sort of thing. But thank you so much for letting me just talk your ear off about migration. This is a topic that I really am interested in, and I just think it's so cool to figure out, where do birds go? I think that's a question a lot of us have. Where did this bird go? Where is it going? Where has it been? What is it doing? So migration and banded birds are just, you know, it's something that's really interesting, really cool. And I hope that you guys see something really neat during the last few months of winter. But if you would like to keep in touch, send me an email about any questions you may have, volunteer opportunities during the summer, or even any bird walks that we might be having that are specifically on the beach. Please feel free to reach out, or you can check out these other websites as well. So if there are any questions, I can definitely take those now.
Yeah, now's a great time if you want to type something in the Q&A. I had a lead-off question. I noticed there are different legs for different bands. There's upper leg, lower leg.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, if they're shorebirds and they're wading, the lower ones are harder to see. So I'm sure there's like a clearinghouse where if they see one number, then they know all the other numbers.
Sometimes. Sometimes. So let's see. There is a banded piping plover. Some of you may know her as I think maybe Fred, named by a local birder, Fred. She's at Fred Howard Park. So it's a banded piping plover, and I think the code on her band is 064. So she has a sibling that has also showed up that her code is 063. So so these codes, sometimes these banding combinations, and now with piping plovers, it is because it is a federally listed species, there are multiple banding programs for them. So it can get a little tricky. But it is usually best if there is a code to get the whole code off of that band, because with Fred or 064 at Fred Howard Park, that band is actually, I think it's like a band combination they give as chicks. And then when they if they are able to recapture them, then they give them a whole other combination. So those chicks were, 063 and 064, they're siblings. It's just a whole to do. It's just that it's hard, but sometimes based on past resightings, where the bird has been seen, you can sometimes get a partial code or a partial combination, and you're kind of able to tell which bird that is. But if possible, trying to get the whole combination. But Michelle, like you said, when a bird is foraging in the water and you can only see, knees up or, the top of the legs, that's really tough. Now, sometimes, during really cold days, and when I'm trying to survey for snowy plover bands, for instance, when they're really poofed up and trying to stay warm, you can't see the upper legs. So it's just, it's really tough, but it's really fun if that's something that you're interested in. It's like a little treasure hunt, trying to find these individual birds, for sure.
I don't see any other questions. You must have been completely thorough.
Well, now I don't know about that. I'm sure that I missed something, but I hope it was thorough.
Now, when you send me information about upcoming trainings, we share those to our membership, and we put those on Facebook, of course, because I know there'll be some opportunities in the spring.
Yes.
So be sure to share those with us. And if for anyone who's online right now, obviously you have her information here, and I put the banding site, the reporting site, in the chat for you. Even if you just want to learn more about how all that works, the information's there. It's just a lot of fun. I mean,
Oh yeah,
like a little mystery every time you see one of those little bands.
Oh, I know. And I think I had spoken to Dale maybe a week or so ago, and we were chatting about a couple of the beach walks I was able to put together coming up. But I think that you guys will also have some beach walks as well coming up too. And Fred Howard Park, if you guys go to Honeymoon Island, or even, Dunedin Causeway, those sites usually, keep an eye out. They usually do have banded birds there. It can be tricky when it's a huge flock, but you never know. You never know who could be banded. Like I said, that laughing gull, that one time, I've never seen a banded laughing gull. I haven't seen it since. And it's just like, it's anything could be out there. think you're on mute somehow.
All
There
right.
you go.
We do have a question. What percentage of birds in a flock would have bands? Ballpark.
Oh, that's a great question. Percentage wise, I would say, less than, I would say maybe, less than a quarter, most likely. And that's probably even like a really big number. Usually out of a flock of, let's do ballpark number, out of a flock of like 2 to 250 skimmers, for instance. We could have anywhere between 1 banded skimmer or 6 banded skimmers, just depending on the habitat use. Of course, we have a lot of locally banded skimmers, so we are probably going to see banded skimmers more often than other species. So it really depends on the species. It depends on where you are, which birds like to use that habitat. But I would say, I would be comfortable saying less than 25%, probably lower than that.
And seasonal too, I would guess, certain times of the year, obviously. Yeah.
Of course, seasonal, yes. Like at one of our black skimmer colonies, you are absolutely going to have a few banded skimmers, but that's because that is a banding location. But at wintering sites, it could be something entirely different.
Like 5-6 years ago, when I was on the Sankey during the fall migration, and when I was right there, a couple hundred red nuts arrived. There were about 10 banded red nuts among those. So yeah,
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's very true. When they used to, oh gosh, I miss them showing up there. When we would get up to like 1,000 in that flock, that would just stop over. Now it seems like they completely bypass Sand Key and head straight down to Outback Key, which is understandable. It's nice flats, good foraging over there. But yeah, I have even gotten up to, in that flock of 1,000, up to 20, 25 bands out of there. And that's just, thinking you did really good. I missed it to, in that flock of 1,000, up to 20, 25 bands out of there. And that's just, thinking you did really good. I missed it to, in that flock of 1,000, up to 20. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, there was a little bit of feedback.
There's a little
back.
We do have another question. Do you have to know the species of bird to report a band?
Great question. Yes. You can have, the same color and same code for 2 different species. So it's very important to know the species that you are reporting for. But something if you aren't sure of the species, take a picture. Pictures are fantastic. They can help you identify the species, but they can help you, just document that band and the combination. The banders are usually very happy to get photos anyway, just to see how their bird is doing. Usually, they'll have a baby picture of the bird from when it was banded as a chick, and then, they love to see it as an adult in, another area. So photos help document species, band combination, code, band colors. So I highly recommend getting a photo if you're unsure of a species.
Awesome. Good to know. All righty. Well, fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I love hearing about shorebirds. I live very close to the Dunedin Causeway. I like to walk out there and take pictures. I'm going to have to get my bigger lens on to see those bands though.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us. Thank you all of the members for joining us tonight and for your continued support of Clearwater Audubon. I know you just got our appeals letter, and we're just super grateful for all the support. Hopefully we'll be in person January 3rd for our next meeting at Moccasin Lake Nature Park. We'll be sending out more information about that. I believe the Bells will be our speakers. Going to be so much fun. And find us on social media if that's your thing. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and sign up for our MailChimp. You can do that on our website under programs. We just updated all of our spring field trips, so be sure to check those out. That's not even out on a MailChimp yet. It's like you just have to go to our website to check that out, but there are some very cool trips coming up. I'm excited about that. Yeah, and one to Fred Howard Park, I think, is on the 11th. So look for those bands. Take your big camera. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining us, and hope you have a fantastic holiday. Junaid, do you have anything to add?
No, but just in case, if you are planning to help with the count, CBC, Christmas bird count, let me or Bill Camper know about it, so we can put you in a particular spot that you can help out. That's on December 26th, the day after Christmas, by the way, on
That's
a
right.
Sunday. Okay.
No leftovers, just go birding. Just go out. All righty, thank you so much. If you know a friend that wasn't able to see it tonight, we're going to put it on YouTube so you can see that tomorrow. Oh, are your email addresses on the website? I believe Junaid's is on the board page, but their phone numbers are on the website. So if you go to our field trip page, you'll see the information for the Christmas bird count. That's a really great question. Thanks for asking that one. All righty, well, we'll say good night to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night.